This episode is sponsored by NordVPN, the best and safest way to protect your online private data. Sign up to NordVPN now and get an exclusive discount by going to nordvpn.com/evolutionofhorror. That's nordvpn.com/evolutionofhorror. Technology predates us. Around 3 million years ago, our ancestors learned to use tools for the first time. Human beings have only existed on this planet for 300,000 years, and it wasn't until 20,000 years ago, during the Neolithic Revolution, that we began using clay for pottery and bricks, and we invented the wheel. Around 8,000 years ago, humans designed systems of irrigation. 6,000 years ago, sailing ships were invented, allowing travel. 3,000 years ago came the Bronze Age, which saw the production of metal tools. 2,000 years ago, alchemists in China invented gunpowder. 1,000 years ago came the invention of the magnetic compass. Roughly 500 years ago saw the invention of the telescope. Mid-18th century saw the start of the Industrial Revolution, which saw the inventions of steam engines, locomotions, mass printing, spinning looms, telegraphs, combustible engines. The mid-1800s saw the invention of photography and cinema. And of course, the 20th century saw innovations the likes of which humanity had never seen. Aeroplanes, computers, penicillin, and by the mid-1940s, the atomic bomb. In the relatively little time our species has lived on this earth, we've already advanced technology so far we literally have the power to annihilate ourselves. So it's no wonder the dangers of technology provide such rich, fertile ground for horror storytelling. This series will be looking at the evolution of man-made monsters, stories of mad scientists whose horrific creations ultimately led to their destruction.
It's alive! In the name of God!
We'll begin by looking at the 1818 Gothic novel that all but created this subgenre, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and the way in which it inspired countless adaptations, from the iconic Universal classics,
The Bride of Frankenstein,
to Hammer's blood-drenched adaptations.
This is Frankenstein, who revolted against nature, who experimented with the devil and was forever cursed.
To the beloved spoofs.
Frankenstein.
You're putting me on.
No, it's pronounced Frankenstein.
Then we'll be looking at the history of other man-made monsters through cinema history and the way in which they reflected the fears of technology at the time. From Universal classics of the 1930s like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and The Invisible Man.
You're crazy to know who I am, aren't you? All right, I'll show you.
To the atomic monsters of the 1950s. To films about the dangers of computers and AI in the 60s and 70s.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
To the iconic robot sci-fi horror movies of the 80s.
I'll be back.
We'll be talking about the fears and anxieties around the Millennium Bug that defined the late 90s and early 2000s, particularly in Japanese tech horror. And finally, we'll be looking at modern sci-fi horror films and television shows and the way in which they reflect the fears and anxieties around social media, smartphones, and the genuine existential threat posed by artificial intelligence.
Hi, Megan. I'm Katie. It's nice to meet you, Katie.
Join me as we begin our journey through the evolution of man-made monsters. It's alive. Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Muncer, and as ever, I am your host. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre, one subgenre at a time. It's been a while. We've been gone for a little hiatus, but we are back for our 11th series on, as that intro suggested, man-made monsters, the dangers of science in horror cinema. We've got loads of incredible stuff to talk about. We're going to be exploring Frankenstein and mad scientist movies and cyborgs and robots and machines and internet horror and screen life and all kinds of anything basically science and technology based is going to be covered this series. And don't forget, you can keep an eye on our Letterboxd account to find out what movies we're going to be covering in advance. You can follow us on letterboxd.com/evolutionpod. And if you want to listen to these episodes ad-free, from this week onwards, we are going to be uploading ad-free versions of this season of the podcast on our Patreon, patreon.com/evolutionofhorror. If you join up at the $5 tier, that's like £4 per month, you will get ad-free episodes, and you'll also get a whole bunch of bonus episodes every month as well, all on the same feed. Patreon.com/evolutionofhorror. So, let's get stuck into this week's episode. Part 1 of our new series is going to work exactly as part 1 always does. It's going to be a little introduction episode. Later on in the episode, I'll be joined by Freudian cinephile, psychoanalyst Mary Wild. She is going to be sharing her thoughts on this subgenre. But first, we are going to take a little look at the subgenre as a whole. We're going to be talking through some of the themes and trends. We're going to be defining what makes a man-made monster horror movie, and we're going to be running through the history and the evolution of the films within this subgenre. So joining me for this conversation, he's back. He's here every single series for our introductory episodes. He is the encyclopedia of fantastic film and television. He's seen every film in the world. He knows everything there is to know about horror. Welcome back, Kevin Lyons. Hello, Kev.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me again. Always a pleasure to do these things.
Oh, thank you for being here. It's always such a pleasure to do these. I apologise for the fact that it feels like we've picked the hottest day on record right now to record. Right?
We are recording this from the antechambers of hell itself. It's because I'm so high tech, my camera that Mike can see me on has to be held up by a little lump of blue tack, because that's how high tech I am. When I went to put it onto the camera this morning, it had kind of melted. Yeah. It's so hot in here, I had to sort of squish it back together into some form of semi... Anyway, you don't need to hear my problems. Take it from me, it's central London and it's bloody horrific.
Yeah, absolutely. The earth continues to punish us all and destroy us
it
year
does.
by year.
Quite so, right, too. It's our own bloody faults.
And last year, we were discussing that very topic. We were talking about nature coming back to bite us in the arse in the last season of the podcast. Now we're looking at the sort of flip side to that, Kev. We're looking at the dangers of science.
Yes.
The kind of science fiction horror and man-made monsters. And I feel as though, I remember when I first emailed you about this and I sent you the list of films, this is very much your bag, right? You know, we're
absolutely.
We're exploring a lot of Kevin Lyons faves, I feel like, this season.
I grew up reading pulp science fiction.
Right.
I mean, I was such a nerd as a kid that, you know, summer holidays, all the other kids are out playing football, riding their bikes. I'm sitting indoors in, you know, warmish weather, reading one science fiction pulp novel a day, because that was just my thing. I was just consuming them like they were about to be banned.
Fantastic.
You know, and it's my other great love is science fiction. So yeah, this is right up my street.
And science fiction and horror, we talked about this a little bit in the past, but there seems to be such a natural crossover, doesn't there? You know, I think when it comes to the audiences and the communities around it, but also just the stories they tell, they seem to complement each other, don't they?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think they work together well because they're both exceptions from reality. You know, they're both taking us to places that we wouldn't normally go.
Yeah.
And often quite scary places. I think science fiction can be as scary as horror, sometimes perhaps more so.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's... let's get the reference out of the way very early on, because you know which two words are going to come up. I grew up watching Doctor Who, and Doctor Who was science fiction. Yay! Doctor Who was science fiction, but it was absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
It's what taught me that it was okay to be scared. Mm-hmm. You know, that it was all right to be entertained by being scared. And so science fiction very much has that sort of crossover with horror, and horror touches a lot on science fiction concepts, as we'll find out as we go along.
Exactly. And I suppose this is it. With science fiction, you can get all sorts, and you can get the more... almost like sort of utopia type stories, I suppose. You could get stuff like Star Trek and that kind of thing. But then on the flip side, you can get, and I suppose this is where we cross over with horror more, almost like cautionary tales, right? Of
Definitely.
kind of the dangers of science.
Yes.
How far back does that go, Kev? I mean, I feel as though the church and religion were warning us of the dangers of science for millennia, right?
Absolutely, although we need to temper that with the fact that they had their own agenda there.
Well, absolutely.
Science is kind of neutral. Science is neutral. Science doesn't care about us. Just like nature doesn't care about us. We're just part of it. Science is a way of understanding the natural world and the natural universe and the natural infinity and however far you want to take it. It's a way for us to put it in digestible boxes.
Right.
So that we can understand and make sense of it. There's a really famous saying by Arthur C. Clarke. It was one of his 3 laws. And it says any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Right.
And technology is kind of the end result of science.
Yeah.
Technology is, we do science and technology springs from that. And going way back 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years, there were things happening which looked bizarre, inexplicable. Nowadays, we understand what that was. We understand the weather. We understand astronomy. We understand... Some people understand quantum physics.
Yes.
I've read a few. I'm a bit of a science geek, but only on that level of, quantum physics for dummies.
Yeah.
I'll read that and I'll go around telling everybody, wow, quantum physics is great. I don't understand a word of it. Clever people do, and they can explain the universe to us and help us to understand our place in it. So that's what science is doing.
Right. Yeah.
It's neutral. It doesn't care. The big problem with science is what people do with it.
Right, absolutely.
The big problem is, as it always is human beings.
always, you're right. And I think
always a problem.
It's so interesting, isn't it? There's a, obviously science and the discovery of so much science has been such a positive thing for humanity, whether it's discovering everything from kind of, antibiotics to medicine to, all of these kind of things, technology. But then it always feels as though it gets to a point when then we cross a line, don't we? And,
Yes.
and I suppose that's what we're exploring. And I think it's really interesting when you look at scientific discoveries over the last 100 years and the horrors they could potentially inflict upon the world, right? Whether it's the invention of the Oppenheimer's atomic bomb, whether it's the invention of AI, and suddenly storytellers have a field day, don't they, with kind of exploring what this could mean for humanity, Well, science fiction
is the best science fiction. I think I may have said this on here before. It's not about the future. Maybe set in the future. It's about now. It's about looking around at what's going on now and saying, okay, where's this going?
Yes.
Where are we heading with this? And, all the best science fiction, the obvious one there, of course, is 1984.
Right.
Which was looking at 1948 and the horrors of fascism and authoritarianism. Did we listen? No. Sorry, George, we weren't listening to you. We completely ignored you and we allowed things to happen. But that's what I think science fiction does best. It looks at the world around us and says, if we don't stop doing this, where are we going to end up?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's when it becomes super scary.
Yeah. And of course, like you said, the religion and the church have always had an agenda, and it feels as though historically they are always at loggerheads, right? And there's that idea that if you are messing with science, you are messing with God, and you are playing God.
There are some things man should leave alone.
People like Galileo were persecuted, weren't they? It's always been there.
We have a history, and it's a horrific history in the human race. Sorry, guys, I'm going to bring you down. I bet you're having a lovely day, but this is an inalienable truth. We like to pick on clever people.
Right.
We don't like clever people. They must be up to something because they're so smart. So we immediately start to victimise them and pick on them. You're seeing it now. Go on Twitter for more than 5 minutes and hold on to your sanity when you look at some of the attacks on scientists and virologists and whatever.
Yep.
People who are cleverer than us. Don't be afraid of people that are cleverer than you.
No.
I love people who are cleverer than me. Because, I've got friends who are scientists. I've got family who are scientists. They make me feel like a 3-year-old kid, like I know nothing. But they don't do it deliberately. They do it because they love their subject and they want to educate and inform us about things. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, we are a horrible species like that we will, a smart person, burn them at the stake.
Right.
Because they're too clever and they're saying things that are interesting and you're going to change our world. Do we don't want our world changed? Yes, you do. You want the world changed. Trust me.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about the kind of key movies here that fit within this topic. But I guess, first of all, sort of pre-cinema, Kev, how far back do these kinds of stories go in terms of, man messing with science and that kind of horror sci-fi crossover?
Well, man messing with science, we have to kind of wait until science exists.
Right.
And science, as we understand it, hasn't existed for that long. It's, in the greater scheme of the lifespan of mankind on this planet, it's a very, 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 very tiny little bit right at the end that we've had science.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of superstition and we've had a lot of very clever people who, like I say, we burnt at stakes because they were saying, this medicine works, this is great, let's use this. It was like, no, witch, burn her, all that sort of stuff. So we had all these clever people that were there, but they didn't have the language to explain it in scientific terms.
Right.
And certainly the sort of the lay person, this is, if we go back pre-education, and there was a time not that long ago when people just weren't educated in any systematic way. Yeah. We're back to Arthur C. Clarke again. It all looked like magic. And it wasn't. I mean, you find references as far back as like the Ramayana, the Indian Hindu epic of the 5th or 4th century BC. It's got flying machines that carry people into space and they use advanced weaponry.
Wow.
Weapons of mass destruction. They're given to them by the gods rather than science, but it's there. And that's what happened, that we had a lot of these things where we were given gifts from the gods, which we now understand were people trying to understand scientific concepts.
Yeah.
But it goes way back. It goes way back to, the first ape man that fell out of a tree and thought, why did I fall out of a tree? Right. It took several hundred years, 1,000 years, millions of years maybe, before, sort of Newton came along and an apple fell on his head and he thought, gravity. And, but they would have been doing that right from the start. Just, like I say, there was no language to explain it to themselves, let alone to others. So we have to wait until the advent of science. We kind of have to wait until really the Enlightenment, I guess, when we start seeing these things. And we're going to talk a lot more about this, but ground zero for any of these things is Frankenstein.
It is.
Which is where science fiction really begins. It's where horror really begins. Yeah. It's the most important book for both of our genres.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating that it's kind of chapter one for both sci-fi and horror? Like but they owe so much to Mary Shelley, who, oh my God, was about 18 years old.
She was 18 years old. And, worse still, shock horror, brace yourself, guys, she was a woman.
She was a woman! Oh my God. Unbelievable. When I think about myself, 18 years old, I could barely write a sentence properly, let alone a novel like that. It's unbelievable.
I spent, like most 18-year-olds, I think, I spent most of my time whining about how unfair everything was.
Right.
She writes a novel which defines two of the most popular genres of fiction ever. And just tosses it off in a competition that she's having with her friends. It's not even like she sat down and thought, I'm going to write a genre-defining novel. It was just like, let's write a scary novel. Okay, I've got an idea. She just bangs this out virtually overnight or over a weekend.
Unbelievable.
And she's 18 years old.
Yeah.
Let's never forget that. That is absolutely incredible. And, Guillermo del Toro, who knows a thing or two about Frankenstein.
Yeah.
He's got a film coming out very soon. He actually said it was the quintessential teenage novel.
Right, that's interesting.
And I first read it when I was a teenager.
Same.
And of course it is. It's about alienation.
Yes, the
it's
outsider.
About not belonging, the outsider. And, we all of us believe that we're alienated and the outsider when we're teenagers. We're not. We're leading very comfortable lives in the West. We've got absolutely nothing to complain about. But of course we do, because we're teenagers.
Yeah.
And so it does. It sort of triggers with people, doesn't it? Resonates with people because they recognise themselves in the creature.
Yes.
This misunderstood, ungainly, articulate, but kind of frightened, kind of scary, kind of just misunderstood in general.
Yeah.
And, so teenage, it is the quintessential, Guillermo's right, it's the quintessential teenage novel. So she not only invents horror and science fiction, she invents a teenage novel.
That's so interesting, isn't it? And you're absolutely right. And in some ways, the term monster is so broad, and obviously we could mean anything by that. And monster could encompass ghosts and even animals and beasts. But I feel like as well, there's something about Frankenstein's creature that is the original kind of quintessential monster too, right?
Yeah.
I feel like if people, even young children, are told, be a monster, they might act like Boris Karloff's Frankenstein creature,
of course
right?
They will. That film has so much to take the blame for, to take the credit for, whichever way you look at it. When we nowadays, all of us, whenever we think Frankenstein, we don't think this 8 foot tall, I think he's yellow skinned in the book. We don't think of that, and this sort of very articulate.
Yes, very articulate.
Creation.
Yeah.
He's, maybe a little bit too articulate. The book does go on a little bit with his philosophising and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I'm midway through a reread at the moment, actually, and it's there are a lot of long letters. There's a lot of description.
There are, exactly. Yeah, he's a little bit too chatty, I think, at times. But we don't think of that when we say Frankenstein's a monster.
No.
What we think of is the guy with the bolts in his neck and the flat top head.
Absolutely.
Because that image that Karloff helped create has become the default setting for the Frankenstein monster. That's when he becomes a monster rather than a creature.
So interesting, isn't it? And of course, in that film and in the original novel, he is a sympathetic monster as well, right? And again, that idea of the man-made monster... Actually, who is the real monster? Is it Victor Frankenstein, really, right? Who's the real monster in this story?
Of course it is. Yeah, there's no doubt in that Victor is the monster in this. Is he a mad scientist? I don't think he's mad. I think he's misguided.
And again, actually, this is, we'll talk about this a lot, I'm sure, but how different Mary Shelley's novel is to almost all the adaptations, actually.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar with Dracula, isn't it? You sort of forget that most Dracula films were actually based on the play rather than the novel.
Right.
And there's something of that to Frankenstein, too, because there are a lot of films we might think of, and he's a bit more maniacal, it's alive, and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And in Mary Shelley's novel, he's not like that, really,
not at all. No, he's, like I say, he's seriously misguided.
Yeah.
I mean, to a staggering degree. He's ambitious, he's obsessed.
Yeah.
But he's not mad. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he's just, but sort of the one of the great themes of the novel, which sort of then resonates right through to today, is the fact that this obsessed scientist creates something he then can't control.
Yeah.
And that's the key to the story, isn't it, really? That, he's created this... I think it's one of the differences, isn't it, between Dracula and Frankenstein, the novels, that the creation didn't ask to be born.
Right, yeah.
He's kind of a victim of circumstance. He's not really a monster. He doesn't want to hurt people. He's driven to that by circumstances. Dracula is evil incarnate.
Right, yes.
All he does is exist to kill. And he kills to exist. That's why they're so different. The difference between the two of them. Dracula, I think, kind of works a little bit best in the shadows.
Yes, agreed.
When he's lurking in the background, and he's this awful influence he exerts. We need the creature to be up front.
That's right.
Because we need to understand the creature. We need to understand what he's going through, and we sympathise with him. I don't think there probably are a few people, but very few people will sympathise with Dracula.
That's right.
Because he really is a monster.
Absolutely.
He really is.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting, rereading the novel, I almost forgot how immediately that regret kicks in for Victor Frankenstein. Yeah. He is, like you say, obsessed. He is a man obsessed with kind of conquering science, and there's alchemy and all of that kind of stuff he talks about. And then the second that his creature wakes up and opens its eyes, he is immediately like, what have I done? Right? There isn't really a celebratory "it's alive" moment. It is like, oh shit, this was a massive mistake, right? And again, that one single moment, I feel like, is what triggers that whole genre of, oh my god, I've messed with something I shouldn't have. Oh my god,
Indeed, that echoes right through to 1945, doesn't it? Where the first atomic bomb is dropped on Hiroshima,
right?
And apparently the crew of the Enola Gay, the bomber, didn't know. They were told it was an experimental weapon. They didn't know what the effect was going to be, mainly because I don't think the scientists really knew.
Yeah.
They dropped the bomb, and apparently, as I understand it, the pilot simply said, "My God, what have we done?"
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, that instant regret. And, Oppenheimer came to regret his part in creating the atom bomb because they were all carried away in the science of it.
That's right.
They were sort of, scientists are like that. They're obsessive. They love to dig in as far as they can to get to the bottom of the mysteries. Certainly in cinema, they don't think about it too much. They don't think what the consequence is going to be.
It's that incredible, iconic line from Jurassic Park, which we are going to be covering this series, of course, which is you spent so long obsessing about whether you could that you never stopped to think about whether you should, right? And that's Victor Frankenstein, that's Oppenheimer, that's that's every major
That's the
scientist.
poster tag for this season.
It is.
So yes, you can do it, but should you?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And that's every single scientist that we're going to encounter in this season.
Yeah.
If someone had just took them to one side and said, "Hang on, mate, we know you're clever and you can do this.
Take a minute.
It's a good idea."
Yeah.
We wouldn't have many films to watch.
Right, exactly. What are your thoughts generally, Kev, on the novel? Do you find it? Do you enjoy reading that novel still?
Can I admit that I don't really? I do find it a little bit like Dracula, and I know there are plenty of fans of both of the books, and I totally get that. I totally admire that, and I get where they're coming from, but I find it a bit hard going.
Yeah. It is. Simply
because my childhood was obsessed with pulp science fiction.
Exactly.
And so that anything earlier than about 1940, if it's not M.R. James or maybe a few Charles Dickens, I find it a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible thing to admit. That's an awful thing to admit.
I completely agree. I think I remember reading it at school.
Yeah.
And it feels a bit like work. It feels a bit like school work.
Exactly. And that was just the style of writing back then. I grew up being much more used to fast-paced, zippy writing, not always particularly good writing, and there's no way I'm comparing pulp science fiction to Mary Shelley, for God's sake, but it was what I grew up with. And when I came to read Frankenstein as a teenager, I identified with the creature, I identified with the themes, but I did find it a bit of a slog, and it perhaps says something. I've never been back to it since.
Right, yeah.
I've never read it again.
Yeah.
And I wonder if as a, sort of knackered, broken down old 63-year-old, and stop me at some point, honestly, you don't have to let me say this about myself, right? I'm a 63-year-old. I'm broken, I'm knackered, I'm falling apart. Would I feel the same way about the book now?
Yeah.
I think as a teenager, it did resonate. Now, I'm rapidly heading towards one of those body parts that the monsters are made of, But as a teenager, when you're full of life and energy or something like it, you read it and you identify with the creature. I think that's the time to read it. I think after that it becomes much more difficult.
It's but it's incredible, like you say, that it was written as a bit of a competition. Anyone who's seen Ken Russell's Gothic might know about this backstory, right? But this idea of she was, hanging out with people like Byron and Percy Shelley and all these people, right? And I just love the idea that this genre, these two genres were invented by an 18-year-old girl, right? Just incredible. I think it's incredible.
I find it absolutely I find that much more interesting than the book itself.
I agree.
To be honest. I just find it staggering that, like we said earlier, when we were 18, we were useless.
Yeah.
Just like most 18-year-olds. We didn't know what we wanted to do. We were just, sort of, I can go to the pub now. Oh, this is great. And that was kind of, there's a girl. What do I say to her? That's kind of what we're thinking of. She was amazing. She was a genius.
Unbelievable.
And we can never take that away from her. I may not enjoy reading the book, but my God, she was something special.
And it's often, talked about alongside Dracula, the novel. But again, you kind of forget just how much earlier. 1818. This is... And Dracula was 1897. If you think of the difference between 1918 and 1997, right? Like, that's a long time.
That's a long time, yeah. That was the end of the First World War, so almost the end of the millennium. That's,
right,
that's
it's amazing.
Staggering. That is,
yeah. So she really is the pioneer, isn't she? Of kind of Gothic horror and all of that, yeah.
And I will always, to my dying day, defend her as the mother of science fiction and horror.
Yeah.
There may have been other, Gothic novels around. There may have been other novels that flirted with science fiction, but she was the one that made what we think of as science fiction and horror.
Yeah, absolutely. And for whatever reason, Kev, this a bit like Dracula, again, there are so many parallels, but this lends itself so well to adaptations, right? And
of course,
we have had, God knows, I mean, it must be alongside Dracula, alongside Sherlock Holmes, one of the most portrayed characters, one of the most adapted novels of all time, I think, right?
I think it works brilliantly as a metaphor.
Yes.
The creature. So it's adaptable to any time period, anything, any message that people want to convey. 1818, and we're about to get another version of a film version of it. They're still making them. Yeah. And there's no sign that that's ever going to stop. People never get tired of Frankenstein.
No.
Because of the themes, because of the way it resonates with us. And so it triggers emotions in it in us that might not be positive necessarily, but they still make us feel something.
Yeah.
And there's very few works that can do that, I think. And it's immortal. It's as immortal as the creature would have been.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think, to be honest, my grandchildren will be watching versions of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
I think it's never going to go away. Every few years someone will make... And it appears in other ways as well. That, it's not just about the monster. You mentioned Jurassic Park.
Right.
What's that if not a Frankenstein story?
Absolutely.
Scientists dabble with something they shouldn't be dabbling with, lose control of it.
Yeah. Everything from kind of Reanimator to even Poor Things, right? Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things. Yeah,
absolutely. They're all Frankenstein films.
Yeah, incredible.
It's just they don't feature Frankenstein or the creature, but that doesn't matter. They're using the same basic idea that this, let's say one last time, this 18-year-old girl came up with in one weekend in 1880. I mean, it's mind-blowing. It still blows my mind every time I think of it.
So let's talk about cinema when it comes to this subgenre, and I suppose Frankenstein too, because Frankenstein adaptations happen, it feels like almost immediately when cinema becomes a medium, right? You get, I found the earliest one going back as far as 1910, I believe,
1910?
Right? Yeah.
I mean, it's not much of an adaptation. They weren't back then.
No.
This wasn't some great 2-hour epic doing the whole story. He takes the creation scene. It's sort of the monster, which is quite effective, comes out of a sort of alchemist pot.
Right, yeah.
But it's the same story.
Yeah.
Man creates monster gets its own back, basically. It's the same story. There's a lovely scene in it where the monster catches sight of itself in the mirror.
Yes.
And he's horrified by what it sees, and he says, boy, does that resonate with teenagers.
Right, exactly.
With our whole body consciousness thing that we go through as a teenager.
Yeah.
And some of us never stopped going through, but, as a teenager, it's a particularly vital moment that we sort of look at ourselves in the mirror and think, oh, my God, you're looking perfectly fine. Great, but...
Yeah.
We all go through that, like, oh my God, I'm a monster, I'm hideous. And so when you see scenes like that, you can't help but flash back to your own moment of looking at yourself in the mirror and thinking, oh, I'm hideous.
Completely.
Yeah, and it just breaks your heart, doesn't it? It really does.
It does. Yeah. It really does. And then when it comes to kind of the sort of 1920s, how important, for example, is Fritz Lang's Metropolis to sci-fi man-made monsters? Again, that feels like a real milestone moment, right?
It's not the first robot, but it's the best of the first robots.
Right. Yeah.
Maria has never been bettered, as far as I'm concerned, as far as robots go.
Yeah.
She is incredible. He creates this proper future world that feels lived in.
Yeah.
Creates a society that makes a sort of sense.
Yeah.
And this again was all about science fiction. It's not a phrase that I like, but world building.
Right, yeah.
Is what science fiction is about. It's about convincing you, for it to work, it has to sort of build this society that we then say, oh, yes, I understand that. I can get it. I don't want to live there, but I understand it.
Yeah.
I get it. And he did that brilliantly.
Yeah.
And there are moments of absolute horror.
There are.
In Metropolis. The scientist, Rotwang, his lair.
Yeah.
Which has got the cabalistic signs on the wall. And he is a mad scientist.
Yes.
He's completely loopy. I mean, he's completely off the charts. But that creation scene where they create Maria, that's straight out of Frankenstein.
That's what I was going to say to you. Do you think it was inspired by Frankenstein?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, no, I've no doubt of that whatsoever. It's done in a different way.
Yeah.
But it is essentially, it's Frankenstein's creation rising from the slab.
Yeah.
In this case, she rises from a chair.
Yeah.
And just that few minutes of her as the robot are some of the most beautiful imagery in cinema of any genre.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Of her just sort of, starting to move. It's an extraordinary film.
Yeah. Is it where science fiction itself, I suppose it goes all the way back, doesn't it, in cinema to Voyage to the Moon even, right? I guess it's kind of always been there since the birth of cinema. Yeah. But what about, let's talk about Frankenstein, going back to Frankenstein adaptations. Again, Universal's James Whale's 1931 movie.
Yeah,
what an incredible film, right? Even to this
incredible.
day, yeah. And how important is that movie to horror in general? I suppose
it's essential. I'm going to stick my head on the block and say that horror cinema as we know it today wouldn't exist without the 1931 Frankenstein. We'd had Dracula, but brace yourselves, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to say it. It's a bit talky. It's a bit stagey. It's a bit sluggish. It's, it's a classic film. And yes, Bela Lugosi created the Dracula that we all recognise the same way that Boris Karloff created the monster that we all recognise. But it is a bit of a sluggish film. Frankenstein is totally different. It zips along. It's got some incredible performances in it. It takes the ideas from the novel and then creates what we then think of as Frankenstein.
Yeah.
You've mentioned already, it's alive. Oh. That's now become the sort of the quintessential idea of what Frankenstein is like, the man he's like. The monster, as I said earlier, we think of Boris Karloff with those bolts in his neck, and what an incredible piece of design that is.
Yeah,
what
unbelievable.
And then, couple that with Karloff's astonishing pantomime. Yeah. And I mean that not in a sort of derogatory sense, but the fact that he manages to sell so much without saying a word.
Incredible.
It's absolutely staggering. And, without that, I don't think Universal would have carried on making horror films the way they did. And without those, I don't think we would have had Hammer. I don't think we would have had what then came after Hammer. So it's like, this is a crucial film for the genre. Absolutely, it is.
It is. There's something about, and like we said, it's so different to the book in a lot of ways. And in some ways, this is as important a text, really, as the book, because you're right, it gives us the look of Frankenstein's creature as we know it, really, to be honest. And also I just think of all that other iconography too, the laboratory, the sparks of electricity, the thunder and lightning, the wheels, the stretcher, I don't know, there's something about the way that James Whale's direction, it's like he single-handedly invented the look of modern horror cinema as well,
I think so. I mean, in the novel, the way that the monster is created is very vague. She didn't, because she, for all her amazing properties, she didn't have the language to explain science.
Yeah.
One last time. She was 18 years old. How was she supposed to have the language for something that didn't really exist at the time?
Right.
So she couldn't explain how it worked. And, I'm sure, if you think about it for more than 2 seconds, the science in the 1931 Frankenstein is ludicrous. But they make it look like science.
Yeah.
They give it a sort of a proper reason. Yeah, for the monster being created, all those, the Kenneth Strickfaden gadgetry with all the arcing electricity going up and down and spinning dials and all the rest of it, and it looks like this is the work of a scientist.
Yeah.
This looks like someone who's given some proper thought to this and who's very clever and has created, before he created the monster, he created all this equipment.
Right.
What a genius,
Exactly.
And it does. It gives us that. This is where science fiction and horror cinema really meet.
Yes.
This is the point where they cross over and start getting twisted up together.
That's right. It's a tremendous film. And then James Whale somehow manages to better that almost. With possibly the greatest horror sequel of all time, right? Bride of Frankenstein, which is a breathtaking film, I think, still to this day.
It's staggering, isn't it? It's a sequel, and we're not meant to like sequels.
Right.
The accepted wisdom is we slag the sequels off because they're not as good as the original. There are a few that we can say, I like Mad Max 2 more than Mad Max, or I like Star Trek 2 more than Star Trek, the slow motion picture. But this was one of the absolutely earliest examples of them actually improving on the original. And he does it in so many clever ways. It's not only darker. It's camper.
Yeah.
It's
oh my God, it's brilliant.
Scarier.
Yeah.
It's funnier.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, it's funny. When the bride appears at the end and the wedding bells play on the soundtrack.
Just
absolute
iconic.
Genius, and just, I think he got away with it because horror didn't exist at the time.
Right, exactly.
Not the way we understand it. It wasn't a defined genre. It was still a bit of a playground.
Yeah.
And when you get someone as brilliant as James Whale let loose in that playground, he could do whatever he wanted to do.
I mean, he is unbelievable, I think. I think it was James Swanton who said on this podcast, he said it's almost unfair. It's almost unfair to have James Whale in the same conversation.
Yeah.
He said if you try and list 5 of the best Universal horror films, 4 of them are made by James Whale.
Yeah.
Like the Frankenstein, Bride, Old Dark House, Invisible Man. Like he was, I do feel like he was leagues above some of the other filmmakers at the time,
Oh, definitely. I don't know what was going on in that man's head, but thank God for it. He just looked at the world in a very different way.
Yeah.
And he saw possibilities in the genre that I don't think anybody had seen before.
And I think it's that, like you said, there's something about, for as groundbreaking and as it was, Dracula, there is something a little bit more kind of solemn about it, I think.
Yeah.
James Whale kind of inserted that sense of fun, I think, to horror, right? Like you said, that kind of balance of comedy and horror that he gets.
Yeah,
there is a real
right.
sense of energy and fun and a bit of camp too, like you say. And that's important to horror cinema, a bit of camp, Yeah.
Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein zip along at an extraordinary pace. You just settled in to watch it, and so do the end credits are rolling because it's just so fast.
Yeah,
so fast. There's none of that standing around explaining things to people and looking out of the window, going, "Look, there's a wolf," and not actually showing us.
Yeah.
It's like they were working with similar budgets. Yet James Whale was such a genius.
Mm-hmm.
That he could get so much more out of it. And when James Swanton was saying about, sort of 4 of the 5 best, I mean, your 5 favourite horror directors, James Whale, Terence Fisher, John Carpenter, he's going to take most of the top spots because he did Bride of Frankenstein. He does, the old dark house. I mean, he's one of the greatest horror films ever made. So he's, you're going to have a lot of fun. I believe James may be talking about these films.
He will be. Those 2 movies, Bride and Frankenstein.
You're going to have a lot of fun with James talking about James. So I think that's going to be a good episode. So.
Absolutely. And we will also, I mean, this is the thing, it was a brilliant era, the 1930s, for kind of sci-fi horror, right? Because we are going to be covering James Whale's The Invisible Man.
Yes.
We've also got Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, course, as well. So there was a lot of this at the time, right? The kind of dangers of mad scientists or science gone wrong, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I think for that, we can probably look back a few years to the First World War, where science was first seen to be this really destructive force.
Right.
Science gave the First World War mustard gas. It gave us tanks. It gave us air warfare. And suddenly the public were becoming aware of the fact that, these scientists, they're up to something, aren't they? They're creating these, they're doing wonderful things by creating the medicines that we need to stay alive.
Yeah.
But they're inventing mustard gas as well.
Exactly.
And it's like, so by the time the 30s come round, and war again is in the air, because the war started in 39, but they were talking about it a lot earlier than that.
Yeah.
I think, people were starting to think, well, they did that last time. What are they going to do in the next one?
Yes.
And of course, we found out what they were going to do in the next one. But I think, it's one of those things, and it's a sad truth we have to accept. As I said, technology is the end product of science, the physical manifestation of science. Technology is driven by war.
It is.
It's driven by war and the military, and that is a very sad fact, but it's the way it is. Virtually everything we take for granted today came from one way or another from war or preparing for war. So, so I think the First World War had a huge impact. A whole generation of men were destroyed, maimed, damaged mentally. And so Hollywood responded by saying, yeah, we're on your side. These scientists are horrible. They did that to you, and here they are in the films.
Claude Rains in The Invisible Man is a right mean bastard, isn't he? He's horrible.
I mean, brilliant performance, brilliant film, but my God, he is a monster, isn't he?
He's vicious, isn't he? I think he's one of the most vicious Universal monsters. Like, he kills whole trainloads of people, doesn't he, in that
just
film?
for fun.
Yeah.
Just for fun. He's a sadist.
Yes, that's right.
You know, it's when this is where science is taken to ludicrous extremes. This is where it becomes dangerous in the hands of a madman.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a perfect story for that, isn't it? That you've got this man who's been driven insane by his own experiments, and now he's so devoid of conscience that he can use his science to create mayhem wherever he goes and not feel anything about it.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, that's horrifying.
It is horrifying. It's got that brilliant kind of James Whale comedy about it, where this guy is doing his experiments in the upstairs of a pub, and
of course, yeah.
You get all those brilliant locals going, who is this guy, what's he up to? You know, it's very funny.
One of the great recurring themes, when you think of it, you'll find examples of one of the great recurring themes in British science fiction is when the going gets tough, the tough go down the pub.
That's right.
And you can see that all the way through to Shaun of the Dead, you know, and beyond. He's like, as soon as shit happens, let's go for a pint.
That's right.
You know? And so, you know, Invisible Man is kind of an early example of that. You know, sort of they got all these sort of muttering locals downstairs. You know, like they're all scared of it, but we'll have another quick pint before we go home. You know, that sort of thing. Exactly.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, of course, also kind of based on literature, but those incredible iconic images as well. These movies just have such beautiful iconic imagery, don't they? The Invisible Man, him peeling off the bandage, and Jekyll and Hyde, that incredible mirror transformation shot, of course. Again, the science connects to the science of filmmaking here, I think, right? In just how incredible and pioneering these filmmakers were and what they were able to do with camera tricks at this time.
Well, let's not forget the science was driving cinema at a hell of a rate.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at, the 1931 Dracula and Frankenstein, and come forward 20 years to 1951, and then go slightly later, 1958. We're looking at, 25, 26, 27 years? And suddenly Hammer are making these films, and they are chalk and cheese. They couldn't be more opposite to each other.
Yeah.
And go back now 28 years, and I don't think cinema's changed a huge amount. I think we've slowed down.
That's true.
I think in those early years, there was really a pioneer sense in filmmaking. What can we do with the camera?
Yeah.
And that's why science fiction was so popular as a genre early on. It was because we could do tricks with the camera. You know, Georges Méliès discovered that if you stopped the camera and then started it again, you created a jump and you could move things out of the way or put things in so people could appear and disappear.
Yeah.
And this was, this is all a form of science fiction.
It is.
And it was all driven by the fact that they figured out how the technology of these clunky old cameras worked.
Yeah.
And now we come forward, we've got CGI where we can create entire worlds which never existed. Not always convincingly, it has to be said, but we can.
Yeah.
Again, should we? But we can. And it's, there is that sort of science and technology driving cinema from the earliest days.
Right.
And, filmmakers willing to push the envelope a bit and say, right, what else can we do with this?
Yeah. How? What are your any other favourites, Kev, from the kind of Universal era? Obviously, Frankenstein pops up again, doesn't he? In the kind of Abbott and Costello, in the kind of 1940s era, we get a few more appearances of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's creature throughout the 40s, don't we? Yeah,
we do. And from the period, it's not a Universal film; it's a response to Universal's films. It is, of course, Island of Lost Souls,
right?
Which is another great mad scientist story. Yeah, another one of those examples of you can do that, Dr. Moreau. But honestly, is there any purpose to this? And that's the kind of horror I like in science fiction.
Yeah.
Is that they do things for no reason. There's a wonderful, I'm going to say those two words again. There's a wonderful Doctor Who story where Tom Baker, he confronts this pirate captain who's been sort of dabbling with technology and humans and all the rest of it. And you just kind of lose it and say, well, what's it for?
Yeah.
And that's when the horror really hits home in science fiction. What's it for? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Is there actually
that
any
idea of
reason
why,
for it?
and the response being why not? Basically, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's just that idea of because we can, right? It's you're absolutely right. It's the reason most scientists. It's the reason we wanted to go into space. It's the reason it's just to see if we can.
See if we can. And most of the time, that's
yeah.
benign. When you've got a Dr. Moreau, it's very far from benign.
Right.
You know,
yeah, that film's got some disturbing moments actually for its time.
It's a really
yeah.
upsetting film, actually.
Yeah.
I think, sort of people say, oh, yeah, I've been watching, a Serbian film and all the rest
right.
of it. Go watch, Island of Dr. Salt Island of Lost Souls from the 1930s. It will put your hair on end in places. It's really, really nasty. Not necessarily in a visceral, gory way, but in the way it matters the most. Up here, I'm tapping my head. Up here,
that's right.
It's what it makes you think is happening.
That's right.
Questions your complicity in what's happening by watching it.
So now, you've mentioned it already, but, Oppenheimer, 1945, a turning point in human history, right, in general,
yeah.
and definitely a turning point in horror cinema, because suddenly it feels like in the 1950s horror becomes very technology phobic, right? We are dealing with aliens from outer space, and then we're of course dealing with the big atomic monsters, the giant bugs, the tarantulas, that kind of stuff. It was a real clear response, right, to the 1940s and what had been created, it feels like.
And the world that had been created, because those alien invaders, they couldn't have been more Russian if they'd spoke Russian.
Right.
They were quite clearly those damn commies, out to take our women and steal our jobs and, do horrible things to our dogs and stuff. That's what they were.
Yeah.
There was a metaphor for that. And the giant monsters, that were created by radiation, they were made by people who didn't understand what radiation actually is, but that doesn't matter. It was a metaphor.
Yeah.
It was a metaphor for, they were probably a bit reluctant. It's kind of hard to find actual films about nuclear war being taken seriously in the 1950s.
Well, it's still to this day, I think, too upsetting. I mean, we're going to get to talking about Threads eventually, but there is something still about stories that actually deal with nuclear war are too much for us. We don't want to see it. Yeah,
it's too real. It's too real.
Yeah,
and so what they did in the 50s, I think they sort of sublimated that into, here comes a giant spider that was made by radiation, which was caused by testing the bomb.
Yeah.
Sort of, and in a way, it's kind of a bit more cinematic, because if you have a nuclear war, that's kind of it.
Yeah,
there's not really anywhere else to go after. Threads did, and the day after did, but really, sort of the bit we come for is the end of the world, and that's that. It's like there's nowhere else to go, realistically, after that. Whereas if you've got a giant spider on the loose or a giant ant, you've got a lot more fun with that, can't you? While at the same time delivering this message about how dangerous radiation is.
Yeah,
and how again, what have we done?
What have we done? Exactly.
What have we done?
You're right, and it's a much more kind of accessible, fun way of exploring those ideas. Exactly. I mean, Them is a great fun movie, isn't it? It's
really a terrific
good.
Film. It's the best of all of those American giant monster films, I think. Yeah,
it is.
Godzilla is the best giant monster film, obviously. Yeah. But Them, of the American ones, and let's not forget that Godzilla was atomic.
Absolutely.
He was born at the atomic age. He was born from the only country that's ever lost a nuclear war.
Yeah.
So this was all playing into horror and science fiction in the 1950s, where we were becoming increasingly paranoid about what scientists were. Scientists were suddenly in bed with the military.
That's right.
And it's like, quite often you would have in these films the military and the scientists working together.
That's right, yeah.
And it's kind of like, this is getting a bit scary now, isn't it? I don't like this. This isn't good at all. Yeah. But it was all used as metaphor. And quite brilliantly, I think.
Yeah. Are you a fan of those? Are you a fan of those 50s atomic monster movies, Kev? Generally,
God, I mean, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. These were some of the earliest films I remember seeing. But yes, of course, absolutely. There's Them for me, he's the greatest of the lot.
I agree.
Got absolutely everything. But Tarantula,
it's a great one.
Hello, Tarantula. There's a whole load of these films where sort of, the Black Scorpion and things like that, where these giant monsters are on the rampage. They may not all have been created by radiation, but we all knew what they meant.
Yeah, they were all still kind of science gone wrong, weren't they? Essentially,
There were all these city-destroying monsters,
right?
And what was the greatest of all city-destroying monsters at the time? It was the atom bomb. So they were just stand-ins for the bomb.
Yeah,
and having been born, when I was, it was a very difficult time. I was born in 1962, and in June 1962, and in October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis happened.
God, yeah.
We were living literally in the shadow of the bomb. It was as close as we'd ever got. I can remember my parents telling me several times that they were terrified. They didn't think I'd make it to my first birthday.
That's right. Everyone thought it was imminent at that point in time,
coming.
Didn't they? And there were drills, there were, hide under your desks at school and all of that kind of stuff, right?
And this is why I think, like you say, it was too much to show it for real. There were things like This Is Not a Test, which is a very low-budget science fiction film about a group of people stranded on a road where the war is coming.
Yeah.
And, that took itself a bit more seriously. But I think the public wasn't ready for that. I don't think my parents would have wanted to go to the cinema and watch Threads in 1962.
Yes.
With one baby already here, another baby coming. It's like, do we want to watch that now? Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think they had to couch these things in metaphors so that people like my mum and dad weren't too terrified to go watch them.
Absolutely. And you can see that all the way through history. We've probably talked about it before, Kev, but COVID, right? We've had a lot of COVID era horror movies, but they've never really dealt directly with COVID. They've not been about the virus because we don't really want to watch a film about that. We would rather watch a creepy zombie apocalypse film, or we'd rather watch a kind of lockdown horror movie or something that's just a little bit adjacent to COVID, I suppose.
I've just thought, should we put the cat among the pigeons? Because I seem to remember at one point saying, we're due for a pandemic.
Oh, God.
I think we're due for a nuclear war. Right,
don't.
Everybody's panicking.
Kev, I'm going to edit that out. Don't jinx it. Don't jinx it. Oh, my God. Yeah. But, I think you're right. Like, horror also has to be escapism. Sci-fi also has to be escapism.
Yeah, of course it does.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, they work on two levels, horror and science fiction. The good ones, the best ones, work on two levels where, yes, you can just go and watch a film about, giant ants rampaging around the desert, and it's bloody brilliant, and it's so much fun. That little girl shouting, them, terrified me as a kid. That was just amazing. But then you can look at it again, and see what they were really trying to say, the warnings they were trying. So they work on two levels, possibly even more.
Yeah.
And that's why these films have stood the test of time.
Yeah.
When a lot of other films haven't. There were lots of B-westerns around. Who talks about them?
Right. Exactly.
Because they were just straight ahead stories. The B science fiction and horror stories were metaphors for bigger things. They've lived on.
Absolutely. And also really fun popcorn entertainment as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, Kev, brace yourself. I'm going to ask you to talk about Hammer and Hammer's Frankenstein, right?
How long we got?
How different was Curse of Frankenstein to what we had seen previously, and that entire Frankenstein series that Hammer produced?
Well, the most obvious and trite answer is it was in colour.
Yeah.
So, all those body parts.
Yeah.
They were dripping in blood all of a sudden. By today's standards, very mild, but, there were those famous reviews about, sort of like what kind of people would want to go and see this sort of thing. It's horrible, very mild, but even compared to what Hammer were going to do later, very mild, but at the time, absolutely shocking.
Yeah.
And it was crucial because it sort of brought Gothic horror back.
It did.
After sort of a decade or so of science fiction cinema.
Because Frankenstein was sort of I know they'd done Quatermass and a couple of other things, but Curse of Frankenstein was the first real kind of in-colour Gothic Hammer horror film.
That was the first Gothic.
Yeah.
Quatermass opens the door.
Yeah.
Again, a scientist.
Right.
Who sort of, not at all a mad scientist, but a scientist whose hubris threatens, the future of the world. But it was Frankenstein that really sort of opened that Gothic door.
Yeah.
And suddenly, there were Gothic horrors everywhere in the 60s. People were just making them all over. And so, it was a hugely important film. But the addition of colour was a big a big thing that suddenly we were seeing this gore
Yes.
that we'd never seen before. We also had, the greatest asset any film can ever have, and that was Peter Cushing.
Who is a really brilliantly menacing Victor Frankenstein, isn't he?
Yeah, he's terrific. And what's important here is Hammer, Universal, their series of Frankenstein films followed the monster.
Yes.
Hammer followed the creator.
Right, yeah.
So we get a whole variety of monsters turning up, but it was always, with one lamentable exception that we won't mention, well, it was always Peter Cushing. And, and Peter Cushing just brings that natural gravitas that he has to this role. And it's kind of his signature role, I think, that he's utterly charming, but absolutely, thoroughly... He's a wrong-un.
He's a wrong-un, isn't he? He's very scary and menacing, actually, I think.
Yeah.
Peter Cushing at doing that, yeah.
And, there's a wonderful moment in Curse of Frankenstein, which I think sums up his callousness, when he's just done something absolutely beastly and awful, and it cuts away to him at the breakfast table, and he says, pass the marmalade, as if nothing has happened, and it was that sort of urbaneness, I think, that sort of... A lot of mad scientists in cinema are all twitchy and sort of, they're mad from the beginning. They're up to no good. The Frankenstein even the Hammer one was never like that.
No.
He was never twitchy and sort of, he believed, the Peter Cushing Frankenstein believed totally in what he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right up to the point of, to the last in the series, Frankenstein, the Monster from Hell. He still hasn't learnt his lesson. He's still trying because he thoroughly believes that what he's doing is right.
God, do you have a favourite, maybe apart from the original, do you have a favourite Hammer Frankenstein movie from this era?
Oh, there's so many good ones. I'd go Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed.
Right, yeah, which is what we're going to be covering alongside the original.
That's such a good one. And Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, I have a real soft spot for that film. I know not everybody likes it, but I think time has been very kind to it.
Yeah.
I think it's a very grim film, very dark, very nasty film. And I think it's a terrific film. So it starts and ends with a bang, and you've got these... It's a bit more hit and miss as it goes through. There are a couple of films... you could probably live without, but Frankenstein Created Woman is a good one. Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed is a good one. Revenge is a good one. Mm-hmm. The ones I haven't mentioned, you can probably work out which ones I don't like. But,
yeah, I think it's really interesting. And actually, because of that return to the Gothic, there weren't quite as many other Hammer kind of big sci-fi horror films as much. I suppose the Quatermass films, and there's a couple of fun other ones... Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde as well, right?
You have things like The Man Who Could Cheat Death.
Right, yeah.
Who's using his scientific things to try and be immortal. But yeah, I mean, they more went for the gothic horror, the supernatural. Mm-hmm. We did get things like... could we count the Lost Continent?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
It's kind of fantasy, but it's kind of a science fiction-y sort of thread to it. They did try a full-blown science fiction film in Moon 02, but even the most hardened Hammer fan will draw a discreet veil over that one. It's like, apparently there's a story about how the director, Roy Ward Baker, and Stanley Kubrick met. Oh. Because Kubrick was shooting a film we're going to mention in a minute.
We're going to get to that,
and, yeah, and apparently they were offering each other advice on how to make science. I can't believe that Stanley Kubrick took advice from, Roy Ward Baker's a great director, but the man who made Moon 02, he was taking advice. No, I find that one really difficult to accept.
That's amazing. That is incredible.
But yeah, they did dabble with science fiction quite a lot. There were versions of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the two faces of Dr. Jekyll and things like that. So we had those pottering along as well. And like you say, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, which is fantastic.
Yeah, really fun.
Wonderful film. But by that point, they were trying to do the gothic approach. So yeah.
Now it's time to thank our sponsor for this episode, NordVPN. This season, we are going to be talking quite a lot about the dangers and perils of technology, particularly the online world. So it feels like a perfect time to sign up to NordVPN, the best way to protect your online private data, like your bank details, your passwords, and your online identity. I get to travel a lot with my job, and I find NordVPN super useful. It's good to have on when I'm using my laptop in a public place. NordVPN protects all of my data when I'm on public Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or a library. It's also super useful when you need to access films or TV shows that are only available in other regions. So when I was in the US recently, I switched on NordVPN, switched my region to the UK, so I had a choice of accessing the Shudder back catalogue in the UK and the US. Super useful, especially when trying to find the films that we're going to be covering this season. You get premium cybersecurity for literally the price of a cup of coffee per month, and one NordVPN account can be used on 10 different devices. We are offering some exclusive discounts, so to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, head to nordvpn.com/evolution of horror. This link will give you 4 free extra months on a 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/evolution of horror, and we'll list the link in the show notes. And then, of course, so let's talk about it, Kev. I believe you're a fan of it. 2001, A Space Odyssey. Now, once again, how much of a single milestone is this to sci-fi, to horror, to just cinema in general, I suppose, right?
I don't know. I've never heard of it. Okay, up front, I think it's the greatest film ever made. Okay, right. It's my favourite film of all time, so I'll try not to ramble too much at this point. But
well, and I will say you're coming back on the podcast, and we're going to do an entire episode dedicated to that.
Yeah, so brace yourselves to that one. Take a few days off work, guys, because you're going to need it to listen to that one. But in fact, I did do a podcast before about 2001, and to sort of get in the mood, I had the film running in the background, and I was still talking after the film had finished. So just brace yourself. It is coming, I'm afraid. So
meanwhile, the film goes from the prehistoric age to the future. And Kev's still talking.
And I'm still talking. Yeah, that sums up my life, doesn't it? That really? But yeah, this is a hugely important film, and I know I'm biased, but it is a hugely important film. Yeah. It's one of the first times we see a proper computer.
Yes.
In cinema.
Yes.
And certainly the first time we see a computer that goes a bit nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is down to the fact that the computer is HAL doesn't care that much about us.
Right.
It has a kind of relationship with the astronauts, but it doesn't really care because it's a machine.
Yeah.
What it does, the way it behaves, is because we learn later, is because it wasn't programmed properly. It wasn't given the necessary information. And this is when the whole subgenre of computer science fiction and computer horror films comes along. That's what it's usually about.
Yes.
You know, we haven't given them enough information, and they break down. And poor old Hal. I mean, surely, again, like Frankenstein, again, it's a Frankenstein film, isn't it? They create a monster.
Yes.
It gets out of hand. And like Frankenstein, if you can watch 2001 and not shed a tear when he's singing Daisy, Daisy,
right.
You're a stronger man than I am. Because Hal did not deserve that. You know, he was doing what he thought was best. He was doing what he was programmed to do to preserve the mission. And, you know, it's heartbreaking. He is an extraordinary creation, Hal, and he's the father of virtually all of what was going to come in terms of cinematic computers.
Well, unbelievable, right? Because you're right, he is sympathetic. He's also very scary. I found it very scary as a kid, Hal. And isn't it amazing that it's just a red light? Like, that's literally all it is. It's not got a face or anything like that. It is just a voice and a little blinking red light, basically. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I went to, I can't remember which university it is, in South London. It's got the Stanley Kubrick archive.
Yes.
Rather pleasingly, in the stacks, when you press the button to move the stacks, the little red light comes on. And I said to them, you've really missed a trick here. Every time you press that, somebody should say, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, you're right. It's a red light and this extraordinary voice.
Yeah, it's that voice, isn't it? Yeah.
And there's a really genuinely chilling moment. And it's so subtle because, you know, Kubrick was a genius and he could do these things. But it's when the astronauts get into the pod to try and talk about what they think is wrong with Hal.
Yeah.
And they haven't realised that Hal can lip read.
Ooh, yeah.
And it's just that red eye just looking, and you get his point of view of them in the pod, and you can see it looking backwards and forwards to the lips.
Right.
And he's so far ahead of them. At that point, he knows exactly what they're going to do, and that's where he hatches a plan to start murdering them, because he feels that the mission is being compromised. He has nothing against these guys. Happily play chess with them and, sort of look at their drawings and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
He's happy with that. But the mission was the overriding imperative for him.
Right.
And so he wasn't acting out of evil or malice. He was acting because he'd been told to act that way.
Yeah, that
and
and
that's
that
the
in
danger.
itself is scary, isn't it? There's something,
It is, it is,
and like you
yeah.
say, this really kicked off a wave, and we see it through the 1970s films like Demon Seed and various others. This kind of the artificial intelligence, computers, robots. Even the ship Mother in Alien, right? Like this is where we start to see artificial intelligence and computers become a genuine threat to humanity in stories.
Absolutely.
Right?
And one of the early ones, which I don't think we're covering in this season, but I might keep trying to make a pitch for it, is Colossus, the Forbin project.
Oh, yes. Do you know what? I haven't seen it. I must check it out. Yes.
Oh, you must.
Yeah.
It combines two of our biggest fears of technology, because in this film, they come up with this incredibly brilliant idea. Let's hand over the American nuclear arsenal to a computer.
Right.
Excellent, guys.
God.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
And it's this extraordinary film with one of the most chilling moments in the whole of cinema. You'll know it when you see it. It's to do with a two-word message that flashes up on his little ticker-tape machine. It is genuinely jaw-dropping, like, oh my God, we've gone too far.
Oh, wow.
Just watch it. It is amazing. It's terrifying. Essentially, it's about a computer who then finds that the Russians have got one, so they want to talk to each other. And before we know it, we've lost control of the world.
Oh, my God.
Because these machines have literally got their electronic digital fingers on the trigger, on the button.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it, how I feel like it's such a current conversation, this. It's a very, and we're going to talk about some of the more recent horror films that deal with this, but this very current fear of AI. Presenting a genuine, and we talked last series about how global warming and climate change is presenting a genuine existential threat to us in terms of nature, and I think AI presenting also a genuine existential threat to us in terms of science, right? And stories have been warning us about this ever since the 1960s, probably before that.
And did we listen?
No, exactly.
Did we listen?
Exactly.
No, science fiction writers, go and read loads of science fiction. You'll learn a hell of a lot about the world today and hopefully make fewer mistakes.
Yeah.
Because, we've been warning about this since time immemorial. And, we still keep making the same bloody mistakes over and over and over again. Because it's that thing in mankind, isn't it? We think we know better.
Yeah.
Hubris, I've mentioned the word before, that's what drives virtually everything in this science gone mad season.
Yeah.
Is hubris. It's all about human beings thinking, we can do that, we'll be all right, it'll be fine. It'll be fine to give all the nuclear weapons to a computer. That's all right, that's fine. It's great to make, sort of robot dolls because they're not going to hurt us, are they?
Right.
And it's like, honestly, if you never, always think when you see these things with these scientists, if you've never read a science fiction book.
Right. Yeah.
Have you never seen a science fiction film ever? Because what you're doing is a recipe for disaster from day one. As I say, if they had read a science fiction novel, we wouldn't have some of the great films we've got.
Right, exactly.
Which is just as well. But still, there are times I sit there and think, oh, for God's sake, did you honestly go and read Isaac Asimov and his robot novels and, just think for a second.
Absolutely. Shout out to a couple of iconic comedies from this time as well, Kev, because, I think anyone who's a fan of the gothic horror and the hammer horror of the 60s and 70s must also be a fan of Carry On Screaming, I think, right? I mean, what a film.
Yes. What a film. What a film. He's like, Kenneth Williams is the ultimate mad scientist.
So
does it get any madder?
So
he's
good.
so wonderful. And the whole thing is so great.
Yeah.
So, what other Frankenstein film ends with the words frying tonight? Unbelievable. It's so British. It's so parochial. It's so brilliant. It's the ultimate Carry On film as far as I'm concerned.
I think it's one of the best looking Carry On films because I believe they genuinely got to use some of the sets and costumes from Hammer as well, and so it looks a bit more genuine too when you look at it.
It looks like they've spent a bit of time and money sort of making it look like the real thing, and it works brilliantly. And it works so well because they've understood what the Hammer films were and what they were trying to do.
Right. Exactly.
It's
exactly.
like when you can always tell a really bad horror film when it's quite quite clear that the people who've made it don't understand horror films.
Yeah.
Because all they're doing is sneering at the genre.
That's right. That's right.
Another one which I think you're heading into in the 1970s, which is a masterpiece, is Young Frankenstein.
Well, this is it. This is what I was going to bring up next. Like, again, speaking of a film that understands and loves what it's parodying, I guess, right? Or pastiching.
Mel Brooks loves horror films. He knows how they work. You know, he made the Fly remake, for God's sake.
Yeah.
You know, he bankrolled that. He knows what he's doing,
He knows what he's doing.
And... you know, when he looked at doing a parody of the old Universal horror films, it wasn't from a position of, we can do much better than that.
Right.
It was, I love those films, and I just want to give them a bit of a gentle ribbing.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, it looks like a proper Universal horror film.
It looks gorgeous, that film,
It looks amazing.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it's funny, but no one is really being insulted in it.
No.
Even the monster, the butt of some jokes, the wonderful pudding on the Ritz. I'm going to have a giggling fit just thinking about that scene. But it's like, even that is not taking the mickey out of the monster.
Yeah.
It's glorifying in the monster.
Mm-hmm.
He's sort of saying, look how clever he is. He can sing and dance.
Yes,
Well,
so
sort of
good.
sing and dance.
Yeah.
But it's terrific. It's so good. It's made with love.
It is.
And there are far too many horror comedies. You can rattle off a dozen of them, even as I could at this moment, which you do get the impression they were just sneering at it.
Totally.
Sneering at the genre.
Yeah.
And they don't work for me.
No.
You have to have a genuine love. And I think Young Frankenstein and Carry On Screaming, they do have a genuine love.
They do.
For the genre.
Very funny films. But things get dark again, especially through the 1980s, and there was a real wave of kind of technology, I think kind of also wrapped up with kind of Reaganism and consumerism as here.
Yeah.
That idea of technology being, by the 1980s, very accessible in the home, I suppose, right? So computers, films like War Games, and, you know, this idea, and even ghost stories like Poltergeist, this idea that, like, your television or your Commodore 64 or whatever could be dangerous, right? That idea of technology in the home.
They become conduits for something else.
Yeah.
And part of that was down to ignorance.
Yes.
The pace of change was so great that we were rushing out and buying home computers without really understanding what they were.
Right, exactly.
And in my lifetime, we've gone from, you know, sort of computers that filled a room to, you know, computers that are on mobile phones. We've gone through, in my 63 years on this planet, that's how quick it's gone. And, you know, by the 80s, we were having these machines at home.
Yeah.
And it was like, we didn't understand them.
Did you have a computer, games console or anything like that?
I had several.
Yeah.
I had a Dragon 32.
Excellent.
And a Commodore 64.
Yeah.
Which I tried to learn to program, and I just wasn't very good. And then eventually there was a community centre I used to go to, which had a BBC Micro.
Ooh.
Very expensive. And that's where we did our first fanzines. We did them on a BBC Micro.
Oh, fantastic.
Printing them out and pasting them together and all the rest of it. That's how I started in doing science fiction and horror fanzines back in the 80s.
Wow.
And then later on I got my first PC, which didn't even have a hard drive in it.
Oh, my God.
Your operating system was on a literal floppy disk. You know, those 5
That's right, the big floppy ones.
Yeah. The operating system was on that. You had to have about 5 different copies hidden around parts of the house in case the house burned down, because you wouldn't be able to start your computer again.
Oh, my God.
And, you know, now here we are. We carry them around in our back pockets.
The earliest one I can remember when I was very young, late 80s, early 90s, was an Atari ST. We had an Atari ST.
Oh, yes.
Loved
had an
it.
Atari,
where you had to put the games in on the little floppy disks into the side, and they were amazing. You know, computers were so exciting at this point, weren't they? There was something so exciting about them. We take them for granted now.
Well, now we've got at least one, possibly 2 generations who've never known a home without a computer in it.
Right, absolutely.
You know, I did, like, when I got my one, I can remember my dad being like, what the hell?
Yeah.
You've got a computer?
Yeah.
Like, what? How amazing. And, you know, to my dad's generation, it was absolutely the ultimate in science fiction. Bless him. You know, right up to the day he died, I talked to him on the phone and he'd say, I still can't get onto the internet. Where's the I button that I need to press?
Yeah.
No, there's an E down the bottom. He said, well, no, that's Explorer. That's what you need to...
Right.
Okay, I've pressed that. How do I now get onto the... Oh, Dad, you know. And of course, he was born before the Second World War, so of course he didn't understand. Why would he?
Exactly.
You know? But, you know, we've got kids now, so I say kids patronising, in their 20s and 30s, who've never known a life without a computer at home.
No.
And, you know, sort of kids in their teens who've never known a time without a mobile phone.
No. No, literally an iPhone. I think an iPhone is now 18 years old. So
exactly. Yeah.
And we got some great movies through the 80s that kind of balanced sci-fi and horror. I mean, The Terminator. Again, The Terminator kind of often thought of as this kind of sci-fi action franchise, but that first movie is a proper horror movie, right? You know,
it is.
Yeah.
It's a slasher movie with a robot.
It is.
You know, it's a slasher movie with a robot. And then just because, you know, it's not quite scary enough, we got a nuclear war background.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You know, so you got the slashers, you got robots, you got nuclear war, you know, and it's the epitome of the unstoppableness of technology.
Yeah.
You know, we have to face the fact that we've now reached a point where technology cannot be stopped.
No, exactly.
You know, nobody is going to say, oh, I'm a bit worried about AI. I know, I'll give up my iPad.
Right, that's true.
It's not going to happen. And we'll go out and buy the next generation of computers and tablets and phones and all the rest of it, even while we're worrying about them. But the Terminator is kind of the embodiment of that.
Yes.
The technology, once let loose, just cannot be stopped.
Well, and also
it will just keep going.
And also this idea of kind of technology almost becoming part of us. Like and of course we have to mention Cronenberg here, because there is this wave of body horror mixed with technology, right? You know, that brilliant scene in the original Terminator when his kind of eye comes out and his face is peeling off. Obviously, you get films like RoboCop, you've got Cronenberg's movies, Videodrome, The Fly, whatever. That idea of technology mixing with human flesh and kind of transhumanism and that kind of thing. Yeah. Akira and Tetsuo Iron Man, right? There's a real kind of interesting wave of them at this time. Yeah.
Well, for those of us old enough, which sort of first encountered the idea of a cyborg, which is what these are, in The $6 Million Man,
of course,
on television.
Yeah,
you know, sort of. I can guarantee you that every person of my age has just gone because that's the sound effect he used to make when he ran in slow motion. I can guarantee you, at the very mention of The $6 Million Man or Bionic Woman, every man and woman of my age is going. But that was where we first encountered this idea of a cyborg, that we could have things implanted into us and replaced by us. And that seemed, you know, it's all very benign in The $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman. The Bionic Woman originally dies from her implants and being rejected, but she's brought back to life. Of course she is. It was a television program. But it was the first, you know, benign example of that. Then we get into the 80s. And it all gets very dark. We have, to a certain degree, the cyberpunk movement to thank for this.
Yeah.
You know, when you read Neuromancer by William Gibson, and if you haven't, stop listening to me and go and read Neuromancer by William Gibson. It's simultaneously mind-blowing and terrifying.
Right.
Set in a near-future world where people literally jack into the Matrix. He invented the terms the Matrix and cyberspace to describe the internet. And people have got implants to plug themselves directly in so they can communicate with each other. And as cyberpunk develops, more and more of this extreme body modification came into it. And it became very disturbing. And then that, you know, we see that going over into real life. There's a certain part of the goth subculture which is very into extreme body modification.
Yes.
And, you know, it's kind of, it spills over. But yeah, we had a lot of that where technology invaded our bodies. It was in our homes already.
Yeah.
Now it's in our bodies and it's in our heads.
Well, there's a great double bill that I've thought to add in to this series as well, which is David Cronenberg's Crash with Julia Ducournau's Titan. I think those are some great, people's relationships, shall we say, with cars and machines, right?
Exactly. Our love affair, our fascination, but also our fear. Of technology. Those films capture it perfectly.
And actually, even cars, right? Even transportation comes into this subgenre. You know, Stephen King has a real fear of cars, right?
He does,
look at Christine and Maximum Overdrive as well. Right? Somebody mentioned
Stephen King. He's really good at that. You know, we would remember him for all his sort of, you know, like vampires and all the rest of it, ghost and haunted hotels and stuff. But you know, he did The Stand, which is about a genetically engineered virus escaping.
Right.
And he's constantly talking about the dangers of technology.
Yeah.
like all good writers do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we listen? No, we don't.
bit of a bonkers film, Maximum Overdrive, but a fun concept.
Yeah, bonkers is a good word for it. Let's move on there from that.
Do you know what? A fun suggestion somebody sent in actually was Steven Spielberg's Duel for this as well, because that idea of the truck. Now that truck has a driver, but we don't ever see it, right? In some ways, the monster is the truck.
When the truck goes off the cliff at the end, sorry if you haven't seen it. I mean, where the hell have you been? It's not like it's a hard film to find, but it screeches as it goes off the cliff. It screams like one of the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park as it goes over the cliff. It is alive, that truck. It has a sentience.
Incredible.
And yes, it is. It's kind of the perfect example of using a technology, a product of science, to intimidate other people.
Yeah, totally.
And that's exactly what all these films are really all about.
That's right. It's incredible. And of course, in amongst all of these fun genre films, I am going to talk about Threads and The Day After. Oh my goodness. I know. Everyone just take a little sigh. Because, I mean, this is it. I can't avoid it, right? Because the nuclear bomb, the atomic bomb, is the ultimate man-made monster in a way, isn't it? It's the thing. Yeah. It's the thing that we've already talked about it, that in some ways it was the moment when scientists went too far, I think, right? And I think we're still reckoning with that literally today in the news.
Yes, absolutely.
And these two films, for people who haven't seen them, I would issue a trigger warning. I think they are two of the most
ultimate trigger warnings.
I mean, I think Threads particularly, maybe it's because it's British, that one gets to me, but it is one of the most upsetting 2 hours I've ever sat through.
It's horrifying. And you know what? I showed it to teenage kids. I used to work at I'm not going to know where it was, but I used to work at a social services department. And the unit I was in was looking after teenage kids who had been thrown out of high school for various reasons, some more unpleasant than others, but we tried to give them an education. They were doing in history, they were doing the Cold War. My boss said to me, "Have you got anything about the Cold War?" I thought, well, I've got Threads, it might be a bit much, but show them Threads, that's fine. Because I'd recorded it when it went out. And I went and sat, because I wasn't going to sit through it again, I went and sat downstairs with my boss having a cup of tea. And about 3/4 of the way through the film, the door flies open. There's this young girl, she's, I think, 15, she's pregnant, and she's in tears. It's like, how can you show me this? How can you show this? Horrible. She reported me to my superiors.
I'm not bloody surprised,
But my argument was, I can't stop it now. I was in my 20s, too late now. You might be able to stop this. They didn't, but my idealism at the time said, it's your generation that's going to stop this.
Yeah.
If you don't know it's there, I'm not going to hide this from you, because this is real.
Yeah. Absolutely.
This is horrible, and you need to see it. You need to know it's there.
Do you remember, Kev, did you watch it the night it was broadcast?
I did.
Oh, my God.
We sat and watched it as a family.
What was that like?
I video recorded it because, I was doing that routinely with anything that looked interesting. I would record it off TV. And I don't think any of us have ever been that silent afterwards. Normally, we'd watch a film, right, who wants a cup of tea? That was good, wasn't it? Oh, there's a load of rubbish, wasn't it? Blah, blah, blah. We just sat there.
Yeah.
And just stared at the television, and we couldn't look at each other. We couldn't think what to say to each other. I think I was crying. Yeah. I have a memory of crying at the end of it, and I still do when I watch it now. I'm getting a bit emotional thinking about it now, because I watched it only very recently. And it so upset me again after all these years.
I can't believe it exists. I can't believe it happened.
No.
I can't believe it was made for television. I can't believe it was broadcast on television.
I know.
It's genuinely one of the most disturbing. I mean, you mentioned a Serbian film earlier. This is way more disturbing. Like
nothing
this is,
on Threads. Yeah.
Honestly, I sat there with my mouth agape, my head in my hands, watching it on. And this was way, this was like in the 2010s. I eventually found a copy of it on DVD, I think.
Yeah.
And even then, I could not believe what I was watching, honestly.
Because it's timeless.
It's horrible.
Sadly, it's timeless. It's as relevant today as it was in the 80s. And that, I think, is a damning indictment of us as a species, that it's still relevant. That we could still watch that and people will still be upset by it. It should be something that kids watch now and go, it's a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
But they don't. They watch it now and they cry.
Well, what's so genius about it is that it's almost semi-documentary as well, isn't it? And it's presented with such realism about what would happen to this country. Like, it's just so horrible. And with each stage, it seems to get worse. It's like there's no end. There's no respite.
When the attack happens, the first thing you notice is there's no music.
Right, no.
There's no. This is not a kind of film that uses background. There's no music throughout the whole film.
No.
That's not that kind of film. And you get these things where it's just horrifying. You see these people panicking in the streets of Sheffield, and it cuts to a black screen and the words 60,000 megatons lands on the UK, and then he cuts back to more mayhem, and then he cuts to another one, second wave of attack is launched, and it's so cold.
It's so cold.
It's just, and I think they took a cue there from the Peter Watkins film, The War Game,
right? Yeah,
which the BBC made, but at that time were too cowardly. Let's not go into that to show. And it eventually did turn up on television, but was mostly seen in small cinemas. But that had that cold, detached, sort of fake documentary look to it.
Yeah.
But it works so well when you see the most disturbing line in the whole film is when you've got those bureaucrats down in the basements trying to hold it all together, and everything starts to shake, and there's a loud bang, and this guy goes, "Oh God, not another one!"
Yeah.
It's like, this is just, it's never going to stop, is it?
The human just pain and misery then that you get subjected to. All I can think with the whole time is, if it happens, I'd rather just be right in the blast and just call it a day there and then. Do you know what?
We all agreed that at the time. Yeah. And I think subliminally my move to London
totally.
A decade later, I'm right underneath it. I'm in the firing line.
You're sort of, where are you? You're right in King's Cross area, aren't you, Kev?
King's Cross. I mean, I'm going to be vaporised and not even know what's happening.
Yeah.
Just outside my window, just across here, is what I think are the air raid sirens.
Oh, my God.
It looks like an old air raid siren. So I'm going to get 4 minutes notice. I kind of wish they didn't. What am I going to do in 4 minutes?
You can't even pop on your favourite movie, can you?
At my age, it'd be 4 minutes to get off the sofa, frankly. But, it's like, I'm not going to do anything in 4 minutes. Don't tell me. I just won't know anything about it. What I don't want is to be Ruth in Threads.
No, absolutely.
And I don't want to be Ruth's daughter.
No, honestly, let's move on because it's upsetting even talking about it, right?
I know, I'm getting a little bit emotional. Just one last thing. If you want something that will challenge every preconception you've ever had about what horror films are, watch the last few seconds of Threads.
Yeah, absolutely. Just powerful. One of the most powerful movies ever made, I think, genuinely.
It is. Beautiful, but horrifying.
Yeah. What was going on at the end of the 90s and the turn of the millennium, Kev? We all became absolutely terrified that the world might end once again, right? Because of the millennium bug, right?
The millennium bug,
remember when that was an existential fear? That's quite a funny thing to think about now. Yeah.
When that happened, I was homeless and living in a homeless hostel. And it was, New Year's Eve, and I was thinking, it'd be quite nice to have had my own home to be destroyed in, wouldn't it? But this will do. This is fine. And I was watching the television, and I was waiting for Russia to reach midnight.
Yeah.
Because that was the one they were saying they're the ones they didn't know if they'd solved the millennium bug problem.
Right.
And as it ticked down closer to Russia, there was a genuine, palpable sense of fear. God. Have they sorted this out? Have they switched their nuclear computers to and of course we know it was all a big scare about nothing in the end. But it did, I think that then inspired the sort of end of the millennium. It was kind of a big deal in a lot of ways, and it inspired this new terror of the world around us. We were also, at that time, we were starting to see, the internet.
Yeah.
I first encountered the internet as a student in the early 90s. When it was just text on a screen. Can you imagine it?
Yeah.
It was, but mobile phones were starting to appear.
That's right.
And, so all sorts of things were coming into our lives. People were talking about virtual reality was going to be the next big thing.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, that went nowhere fast, didn't it? But it was very, very fast at the time. So we started to get things like Ringu.
Yeah.
Where the supernatural comes at us through our technology.
Yes, that's right.
We got, Phone, the Korean film, in which the supernatural comes at us through our technology.
That's right.
And we have Pulse, in which the supernatural comes at us through our technology. It goes on and on like this, One Missed Call and all of these films. And they were using technology as a conduit into our world.
Yeah.
So it was the perfect mix of the supernatural and science.
Still, I think, regarded by so many of us horror fans as what a golden little era, right? The kind of Asian and J-horror, K-horror of that period. Like you say,
I've been a bit disillusioned in the 90s with horror. I didn't think it was particularly good, but we got to 98, 99, and suddenly these Japanese horror films were starting to come over, and it was like, oh my God. And then Blair Witch happens, and it all takes off, you know.
Right.
So the end of the 90s becomes his new golden age for horror.
Unbelievable. But you're so right, that kind of brilliant balance they have. I mean, we're going to cover Pulse this series, and that beautiful kind of technology sci-fi mixed with kind of, like you say, kind of ghost stories, right?
That's right,
almost in a Nigel Neal way, I suppose.
I was going to say, isn't it just like the Stone Tape or something, where the supernatural uses technology as conduits into our world? So, and, you know, the Blair Witch Project, is that not a technological horror film?
Yeah.
It couldn't exist without technology. Ghostwatch.
Oh, yeah.
Creating a science through technology. You know, this was all happening in the 90s. And it was because the millennium was approaching, I'm sure of it. We were, you know, we'd embrace these new technologies, but we were terrified of what was going to happen past midnight on, you know, year 2000. It was all a bit scary.
Right, absolutely. So, and of course, like you say, the internet, again, one of those key moments that changes the world forever.
Yes.
And I think we are still reckoning with how we regulate it, how we use it, how we control it, right? And social media and what that has done to the world, I think. And of course, we've seen this over the last 20 years. I think there's been an absolute abundance of horror movies that have dealt with science, right? Everything from Charlie Brooker's Black Mirror to Alex Garland's Ex Machina to all of those kind of screen life movies about social media and that kind of thing.
Right.
It's everywhere now, isn't it? It's clearly one of the big existential fears of our time, I would say.
It's so much everywhere that you don't notice it now, because it's like the technology. We don't notice the technology because it's omnipresent. Yeah. And we don't notice it in the horror films anymore because it's omnipresent. And in a way, that's how it should be, because it's reflecting the world we live in. It shouldn't be a big surprise that, you know, there are social media horror films. It shouldn't be a surprise at all.
Absolutely. A quick shout out for Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein film, Kev, from the early 90s. What did you think of that one?
But you might want to give it a quick shout out. As you might be able to guess, I wasn't hugely impressed by it, I have to say. It was a bit too slick.
Yeah.
It was a bit too Hollywood.
Well, there's a lot of Kenneth Branagh looking beautiful and taking his shirt off throughout the whole film as well, right?
There wasn't there?
Yeah.
And it was kind of, it really was, it was aptly named, it really was Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein.
Yeah.
I've got nothing against Kenneth Branagh. I like Kenneth Branagh as an actor and as a human. He's a very funny guy. But this was definitely his take on Frankenstein.
It was.
It didn't really work for me. I like little rougher edges. I don't like it to be too, particularly with horror, I don't like to be too slick.
Right, exactly.
I don't like to be too Hollywood. You know, I need it to be a bit... It's the roughness that makes horror films scary.
Yeah. Agreed.
Can you imagine a mainstream Hollywood version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Oh,
we don't have to imagine. They've tried it.
We've got that.
Like, yeah, and it doesn't work. It's the rawness of horror that makes it scary for me.
Agreed.
And Threads. I mean, Threads is a very, pardon the pun, threadbare film. It's very sort of, you know, made on a budget. It's rough around the edges, and that's why it's so terrifying, because it feels like you're there in the middle of it.
You're right. Actually,
if it was done all slick, you know. That's why I didn't find The Day After that scary.
Right. I think that's a really good point. And that is a challenge for sci-fi horror, actually, isn't it? In not making it too slick. And I think that's why sometimes with horror, we go the other way. We go to folk horror. We go to found footage. We want that earthy, gritty grain. The rawness.
That's
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas I think sometimes sci-fi has a reputation as being a bit cold, almost a bit kind of clean lines and you know, futuristic and slick and sleek. And that isn't the same as horror, is it? Necessarily.
Exactly. And it's very rare that they get that right. Alien gets it right.
Yeah.
Alien does it. Event Horizon does it. It has that slightly gnarly, grubby, sort of something nasty is going to happen at any second moment. I didn't find like Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola film, I didn't find the Kenneth Branagh Frankenstein that scary, because it didn't feel like scariness was an issue because there were a lot of big names in it, and you knew they weren't going to go the whole way because it's not their style.
Well,
it just didn't work.
Yeah, it's almost going back to that idea of the gothic romance more, isn't it? It's almost more going back to that, what you started by saying, the kind of teenage romanticism almost.
That's right.
So
and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not for me, unfortunately.
Right.
So,
exactly. But again, bringing us back to where we started, we are getting another Frankenstein movie. And we've had zillions of them. I've only pointed out a few of the big ones. Of course, we've had zillions of them, but we are getting
there are whole books about them.
Exactly.
So,
but we are getting Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein later this year, right? Are you excited for that one, Kev?
Of course I am. Guillermo del Toro. I mean, anything by him is exciting. Even his lesser films. I'm not a great fan of Pacific Rim, but I'd rather watch that than watch a Michael Bay film, dare I say it. But at least there's an intelligence there that Guillermo brings to these films. I can call him Guillermo because I met him once and he gave me a hug, so I can call him Guillermo because obviously he's my mate now. Man. But he's an intelligent filmmaker working in the genre, who adores the genre even more than we do, I suspect. Have you seen his house?
Oh my God, his second house, you mean? With
house,
with just horror props and memorabilia.
It's like,
unbelievable.
Amazing. So this is a man who knows what he's doing, who loves what he's doing. He's talking about taking it back closer to the novel. Yeah. Which will be a very interesting take on it, I think. Yeah. Even if it doesn't entirely work, I'm going to be there. Yeah, definitely. And I'm almost certainly going to love it, even if it doesn't quite work 100%, because it's going to be Guillermo del Toro trying to do something different.
Well, what I imagine it will be, because Guillermo del Toro has got a bit of a kind of romantic side, actually, when you think of Shape of Water, and I reckon it's going to be more like Crimson Peak, that kind of gothic, ghostly, almost romantic kind of throwback to the gothic era.
Well, I gave you that quote from him earlier that Frankenstein is the quintessential teenage
Exactly.
And I think that's where he's coming from. I think he's going to lean into the whole sort of alienation and sort of outcast elements of it. It may be less of a horror film than some others. That's all right. That's fine. It's still going to work. I'm very much looking forward to it. It's not often I get terribly excited about modern films. Yeah. But that's 2 this year, because 28 years later, which I saw and absolutely adored, I was so waiting for that. Yeah. And this is the next one and it's very rare that 2 films in a year come out when I'm like, yes, I really want to see that. I might even go to the cinema to watch those,
I love it. So there you go. We are going to continue to get Frankenstein movies.
We are.
We're probably going to continue to get Terminator movies, right? We're going to continue to get Jurassic Park movies. We've got a new one out at the moment. It feels like these kind of sci-fi horror man-made monsters, they are as popular as they ever were 100 years ago, it feels like, right?
Well, while we continue to innovate and, develop new technologies and push back the frontiers of science, there's always going to be a filmmaker who wants to warn us about that. Yeah. So, we're seeing a little glut of AI movies recently.
We have,
We're going to see a lot more of those coming up over the next few years, And so, while we're still this sort of inquisitive, curious species that wants to learn more about the universe that we live in, they'll keep making these films warning us, don't go there. Don't go look at that. Leave that alone. Don't touch that bit. That's, and we'll ignore it and we'll go and touch it. We'll be bloody awful. But, that's what we are as humans. That's what makes us human.
So. Yeah, absolutely. There you go. Well, Kev, I imagine you've got a couple of big obvious answers for this question, but what's your favourite in this whole subgenre, or your favourite amongst the films we're covering this season?
Do I really need to say it again? 2001, the greatest film ever made. And we were, as you say, we were talking much more length about that later on. But that is my favourite film of all time. I think for me, it epitomises this whole sort of like human beings trying to interact with technology and science and really not doing terribly well. And I'll expand on that at great length.
I can't wait. I feel like we will have to take some psychedelic drugs or something for when
I'm surprised you think I don't anyway. I mean, how else would I get through all this rambling without being on psychedelic drugs? No, I think this is going to end up as one of your mini-series, isn't it? Kev rambles about 2001,
I can't wait. Well, until then, Kev, thank you so much. It's always such a joy to have these chats with you. I always look forward to them. And just remind people...
I love doing this.
I'm so glad. Remind people where they can find you, more of your work out there online.
EOFF TV Encyclopedia of Fantastic Film and Television. You can find the main site, eofftv.com. There's the EOFFT review. See, I mean, I can't even say my own bloody website. I really should have thought this through. EOFFTV review, which is a bit dormant at the moment because you can also hear me doing commentaries on things and doing podcasts with these annoying people who keep coming up and interrupting my time and say, will you come and talk to us about 2001, all that sort of stuff. And I'm not doing reviews because of people like you, Muncer, because I've got too much else to work on at the moment. But I'm still out there, still on social media. I'm currently reposting old reviews.
Excellent.
Talking of technological horror films, to yesterday's reposted review. We're in the middle of a heat wave. It was the day the Earth caught fire. So, of course, it was. So come along and join us on that, and you can see what we're doing on that. And I'm on Twitter. I can't call myself to call it the other name. It's always been Twitter, Facebook, and Blue Sky, although I'm not a great social media person, so you might come on and you'll get like a 2-line answer at most. But it's not because I'm horrible. I am.
It's not because it's not because you're secretly an AI computer or anything. No, that's just you.
Seriously,
okay,
if people manufactured an AI computer, they'd give it a much better face and body than the one I'm struggling with. Trust me, they would have gone a lot better than this. But come and say hello, and if I'm, sort of not feeling too hot and grumpy, I might actually hello back. You never know.
Amazing. Kev, thank you so much for your time.
An absolute pleasure.
A big thank you to the brilliant Kevin Lyons. I always love our introduction chats. Hopefully you've got a nice, long, meaty list of titles there that we went through and mentioned, pretty much all of which are going to be covered in depth throughout the rest of this series. So we're going to finish off this introduction episode with a little chat with Freudian cinephile Mary Wild. Mary will be bringing us her takes and her Wild About Horror segments for several films throughout this season. But first of all, she's just dropping in to say hello and discuss her thoughts with me on this season. So a big welcome back to Mary Wild. Hello, Mary.
Hey, Mike. How are you?
I'm okay. I was just saying before we started recording, I'm barely surviving this heat right now, but other than that, I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah, pretty much same.
Yeah. Oh my God. So last year, Mary, we were speaking of dying in this heat. Last year, we were talking about the horrors of nature, and now we're looking at the kind of flip side to that, the kind of horrors of science and like messing with nature, I suppose, and what happens when you play God and that kind of thing. What are your kind of thoughts generally on this, on the kind of, I guess, more kind of sci-fi horror crossover area?
Yeah, I feel like this season does feel like a natural progression, pun intended, from nature as horror, where we witness the terrifying indifference of the natural world. Now the horror seems to be like emerging not from what is outside of us, but from what we've created, from the unnatural forces we've unleashed in our scientific pursuit of mastery and control. So if last season asked us to fear nature, this one asks us to fear ourselves, because the technology and the science we create is really like that black mirror that reflects our psyche.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And actually, so often the monsters, I mean, obviously, we're going to be talking a lot this season about Frankenstein, the kind of like key text for this theme, really. But obviously, famously, that the real monster there is probably Victor Frankenstein, right? Not the creature, actually. So I think that's the kind of interesting perspective on this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about the hubris and the God complex. These narratives expose the unconscious desire for omnipotence and control, and the tragic fall that follows, basically a narcissistic delusion.
Yeah, there's always been this interesting kind of this kind of relationship, I suppose, between science and God or religion or the church or whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, it was for so many centuries, kind of pioneers and scientists were persecuted by the church and that kind of thing, and there is often this kind of push-pull, isn't there, between I guess, like you say, playing God and messing with God and nature and that kind of thing, and science being almost kind of opposed to that, I suppose.
Yeah, I can see from the point of view of like dogmatic religion, the very idea of science, i.e. consolidating human imagination, human energy, onto like a scientific project, that in itself is unfaithful to a dogmatic Abrahamic force, in the clouds that is meant to be governing over us. It's actually, science used in its best ways brings humanity agency and control and mastery over our lives. So to surrender that and put all of our faith in God, in a way renders humanity much more passive. So I can understand why there is this like split between religion and science.
Yeah.
And how like a lot of scientists were villainized and demonized by religious figures over centuries, called witches basically.
Right. Yeah.
And the very notion of a witch ultimately is someone who is, saying, actually, I think I can create magic on my own. I can sit here and alchemize these energies to produce a desired outcome for myself. And that in itself is threatening. Now, where that falls into horror is where things become a little bit more complicated, and there becomes like an obsession of pouring that human vitality into technology and going too far, like like stretching it too far and coming to this like darker, shadowier place. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, that's right, and you're so right about that. It's always like a scientific discovery is often a positive, and then it is brought to its kind of natural endpoint, or it's pushed too far, and then it becomes something negative, right? And you see that over and over again. There are so many conversations even right now about AI, right? And how in some ways this is a kind of really exciting technological advance, and then actually we suddenly all go, oh, actually, are we all doomed now? Like, is this gonna destroy us all? And I feel like there are kind of big milestones in technology, whether it was the creation of, Oppenheimer's creation of the atomic bomb, or the invention of computers, or, exactly artificial intelligence, that kind of thing, where, they all have potential dark paths, right? Which I suppose is ripe for horror storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. And horror is a great language for interrogating those unconscious fears we have towards technology and science.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you a fan generally of the kind of like the Frankenstein type stories? There have been so many film adaptations. Me and Kevin Lyons were just talking about how iconic, particularly that Universal movie is, and how responsible it is for so much horror imagery that we've seen since. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because ultimately, for me, what I see in Frankenstein as a concept, and how it is then sort of reapplied and reimagined, and then evolved, within the horror genre, is this idea of like the project itself of creating this animated entity is really like a container for so much of the scientists' beliefs, fears, unconscious preoccupations. I mean, I would like to think that, the human centipede is like a great evolution of Frankenstein, and that centipede, that monstrosity of people connected mouth to anus, is really reflective of Dr. Heiter's warped imagination. So whatever, I love Tom Six.
I love it. 7 minutes into this chat and you've already said mouth to anus and Mary. I love it. Oh my god, no, you're so right about that, and it's true. I suppose in some ways all of those stories are Frankenstein type monsters, type stories, even Poor Things, of course, as well, like kind of feels like that is the kind of modern Frankenstein story. I mean it's clearly a story that it's crazy, right? Mary Shelley was 18 years old. This was written by this story that basically kind of set the template for the genre. Was written by an 18-year-old girl, right? It's just crazy, isn't it?
Amazing. Amazing.
Unbelievable.
So proud to share my name with her.
Yes, I know. I just think it's amazing, right? And that she wrote it like over a weekend as like a competition with her fellow kind of male writers, right? It's unbelievable.
What a badass.
What a badass. I know. I love it. And I think, yeah, you're right, though. There is a really interesting crossover with body horror, too, right? Of course. Going back to Frankenstein and that idea of piecing people together. We see a lot of it through the kind of 80s and 90s. David Cronenberg, of course, and films like RoboCop and that kind of thing. And Titan and recent movies like that, The Substance. Like, I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to look at, and the way that evolves, kind of the human body and its relationship to technology. I think there's some really interesting things there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how all of that overlaps with, technophobia and the anxiety of automation. All of these things are simultaneously touching on body horror, but also expressing dread over AI and the mechanization of life. And they sort of tap into this deep fear of being replaced, surveilled, or rendered obsolete.
Yes. Are you much of a tech head, Mary, or are you a technophobe? Like, how's your relationship to technology? Do you use a lot of AI and that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm Gen X, so I'm going to be, by virtue of my age, I'm going to be a little bit limited,
Yeah.
But I do love it. Like, what I've learned to use, I engage with on the daily. And I'm constantly fascinated by it. Like, I'm more of a lurker, an observer, than like a real kind of like, let's say pioneering like user of these things. But I find it all super fascinating, and I can't wait to meet my future sex bot one day.
Yes, incredible. Yeah, I'm the same. I'm kind of like, I sort of cautiously dip my toe in, although I haven't really used. I know a lot of people now that use ChatGPT for like everything. Like every day they'll just have it at their fingertips to do whatever they need, answer whatever they need. I haven't got to that point yet. I think I'm still nervous and suspicious of it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, and that's valid. I mean, myself, as you know, I'm, massively into like the studies of human mind and psychology and psychotherapy. I don't mind sharing with you that I do use ChatGPT for therapy.
Oh, cool. And how do you find that?
I find it, I find it really helpful as, it's crucial to say this, as something that is like a complement to traditional therapy. So I'm not sure that I would recommend it as the only thing to do therapeutically, but for how I've used it as a sort of like supplementary resource to individual therapy, I do EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a bit of a mouthful. But in addition to that, I find it really, really helpful. And the key is to learn how to prompt your AI and how to like, essentially educated to serve you. So it has to be, if you have that knowledge to like give it the tools to then help you, that's key. I would not recommend just like blindly starting like ChatGPT with no aim or no expectations set.
Yes, absolutely. And do you have any fears of, there are so many horror films right now, and I suppose there have been for about 10, 15 years. When you think of TV shows like Black Mirror onwards, there have been so many kind of horror, I guess, cautionary tales, right, about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Like, do you have any worries about how fast it's progressing?
A little bit. I'm particularly worried about the militarization of technology.
Yeah.
And like, killer robots and AI used in warfare.
Yeah.
I'm very much against that because I'm anti-war anyway. Obviously, weren't saying at the start. But to introduce the element of non-human decision making into a catastrophic situations such as war. That's just asking for annihilation. That's just a recipe for total destruction of all living organisms. So I am very, very fearful of that. And I think there's a lot of, recent events that cause, are sort of like warranted, in terms of producing fear. I think that ultimately, what needs to happen is a deeper engagement with the emerging technology, not an avoidance of it. Within that chasm and void of refusing to engage with the technology is where our worst fears can actually be created.
Absolutely. We don't want to end up moving, to a Scottish island and living like we're in the 16th century or something, do we? That's the thing. We've got to move.
No.
We've got to embrace it and learn to control it and keep that balance, don't we? I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Engagement is key. Engagement is key. As with everything, as with our own psyche, there's no use repressing it and being fearful and that leading us to avoid completely. The key is to engage with the shadow. And that's why the horror medium is so great, because it's always helping us to process these fears.
Absolutely. And, you talk about the fears of the kind of weaponization of technology. And I think that is the biggest fear, isn't it? That's the thing that we all worry about. I think that's the thing that a lot of horror movies respond to. When you look at the wave of 50s monster movies that all seem to be a reaction to Oppenheimer's atomic bomb, essentially, right? And the bombing of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and it feels like everything was a response to that. Suddenly this idea that technology could bring about mass devastation, and sometimes those are handled in really fun ways, like with big radioactive bugs and things like that. And then sometimes you get movies like the Threads and The Day After, where just the reaction that everyone has when you say the word Threads, right? It's just like, oh my god, it's such an upsetting movie, isn't it?
So bleak.
Yeah. Oh god. Yeah. But this is it. I mean, that is in some ways the bomb is the ultimate man-made monster, isn't it, really? Like, I couldn't not include it in this season.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I applaud you for including that, because even though it's a very traumatizing notion to behold, that is why we have to double down and ensure that we do confront it and we are really upfront in our discussion of our fears, because these things can very quickly get out of control. Yeah. And the more people are mindful and the more this is in our collective awareness, the better chance we have of really pursuing peace, because we are aware of the alternative.
Right. Exactly. It is. It's one of those movies that I feel like everyone should be shown it as like a public service. Yeah. It is. Yeah. It's like the ultimate cautionary tale, isn't it?
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my God. So how are you feeling about, so obviously you're going to be back this season to bring us some of your insights. You're going to pick 10 roughly films this season to talk about. What do you think of the overall list? And are there any particular movies that you're looking forward to kind of diving into this series?
Yes. I love your list. It is so exciting. And I'm really into this kind of movie, I'm really into, I like sci-fi, but I also like this particular style of subgenre in horror that deals in, us really manifesting our worst fears through technology.
Yeah.
And the ones that really caught my attention were Seconds.
Yes, I knew that would appeal to you. That's one of my favorites as well. Such an interesting movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A great blueprint for The Substance.
Yes,
which absolutely. I also love, and that is going to be on my list of ones that I drill down and wild about horror for sure.
Yes.
Also love 2001: A Space Odyssey. Obviously,
of course, we've got some Kubrick, right?
Yeah.
To cover, and again, how? I mean, this is it. Like the AI kind of cautionary tales go back all the way as far as this, don't they? That's the thing. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And I love how that movie, as epic as it is, it sort of hinges on this really important dialogue between humanity and technology.
Yeah.
And it's all sort of like orbiting around this one specific interaction.
Right. Yeah.
It's really fascinating and really gets to the psychology of things.
Oh, it's incredible. One of those films that you kind of almost have to watch on the big screen. It's so beautiful, isn't it?
Yes.
All encompassing. Incredible.
Absolutely. But I also loved Demon Seed.
Yes. Oh, that is good, that movie, isn't it?
It's so good.
Really creepy. It's almost like a home invasion tech horror, isn't it? It's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it's one of the earliest examples of a smart home.
Right, it is. Yeah. Yeah, it's like Alexa from hell, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly. But in there, I've also included on my list Blade Runner, of course, such an iconic film.
Oh my God, yeah, incredible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Chopping Mall as well.
I know, I love it. I was just looking at your list and it's such a deranged list that I've come up with, isn't it? Because you've got like these kind of, masterpieces of cinema. You've got 2001 and Blade Runner, and then you've got Chopping Mall and Frankenhooker.
Literally, I think those two as well. It is quite chaotic, but but I love it. I love it because precisely through all of these different tonalities is how we get the best color and texture and impression of this concept.
I agree. Yeah, exactly. It would be boring to do 30 weeks of the same type of film, right? It's important to mix it up. And I think there is, I'm really excited to hear that you're doing some segments on films like Frankenhooker, because I think it's great to kind of drill into those types of movies, Yeah,
for sure. And especially in Frankenhooker, it is this eroticization of technology.
Yeah.
Where desire fuses with machines and science becomes a conduit for the death drive. And it's so interesting to see how within these storylines, pleasure and destruction become indistinguishable,
Right. Yeah. I love it. I'm so excited to dive into some of these. Ex Machina as well. I mean, I think Alex Garland has been a pretty amazing voice in kind of sci-fi horror over the last 10 years or so, movies like Annihilation as well. He always has such interesting stories to tell, doesn't he? I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like Alex Garland is one of those rare filmmakers working today who transcends his medium and is really like a philosopher. He's engaging with the cinematic form to deliver like a philosophical proposition. And he seems to have a lot to say, in particularly about science and technology. I would even argue that his film Civil War, devastating, absolutely devastating film. But I feel that is also in conversation with these preoccupations about how much we invest in technology that can lead to destruction.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, he's a very smart guy, isn't he, Alex Garland? Have you seen the new 28 Years Later yet?
I still haven't seen it. I'm so behind.
It's good. It's so good. It's so good. But I tell you what, he is a grumpy man, Alex Garland. I mean, I worry about him. I just feel like somebody needs to keep checking in on him, because he always seems like he's got a lot of worries on his shoulders, but an excellent filmmaker nonetheless.
Yes, for sure.
Amazing. Well, there you go. Well, I will maybe go back to I'll ask you this at the very end of the series as well, but do you have a personal favourite out of all of these films in this subgenre? Any sort of personal faves at this point?
Yes, the one that spoke to me out of everything is actually a much more recent release, which is The Substance.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you were a fan of that. Yeah, I loved it.
I'm like a super fan, and I feel like it just says so much about feminine subjectivity, which, as you know, is a really important topic that's very close to my heart.
Yeah.
And, the representation of technology in it is so sleek, and just so like ruinous, and I feel like it is just this epic poem to body dysmorphia, which is something that needs to be eradicated. It's a mind virus, and I just love everything about it, and I love Coralie Ferchéat. What a goddess!
Oh my God, just unbelievable, right? Those films just pop off the screen and they're so interesting. Yeah, I am in complete agreement. I was obsessed with The Substance. Yeah, so good. Well, there you go. Well, Mary, thank you. I'm so excited to dive into this series and hear your perspectives over the next few months. And we'll regroup for a chat at the very end of the series, but also just remind people, what else have you got going on at the moment, and where can people come and find you and find your work?
Thank you so much, Mike, for your continued collaboration and for including me in this amazing podcast that I love so much.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
You guys can follow me at PsychStar on all platforms. And I do produce content also on Patreon, patreon.com/MaryWild. And I've got my first book being published later this year.
Yes. You've revealed, haven't you, on social media, the cover art as well, because it's so gorgeous. You've got that beautiful kind of it's Black Swan, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, and it looks so gorgeous. Yeah.
Thank you so much. The title is Psychoanalyzing Horror Cinema, and it is effectively Wild About Horror, the book.
Love it.
So, this book would not have been possible without you, Mike, and this podcast. It is essentially a compendium. It's a sort of literary adaptation of Wild About Horror. So if you enjoyed those segments, you will like this book for sure.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, Mary, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Well, there we go. That's it for part 1 of Man-Made Monsters. It's good to be back. A massive thank you one more time to Kevin Lyons and Mary Wild for joining me this week. Drop me a little email. Let me know what you think of this week's discussion and what you think of the theme for this season. What films are you particularly looking forward to hearing covered? What films are you hoping are going to be covered? You can get in touch with me by emailing me, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find us on some of the socials. Evolution of Horror is on Instagram and Facebook, and I, Mike Muncer, am on Instagram and Blue Sky. And don't forget, if you want ad-free versions of this new season and get treated to regular bonus content every month, sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/evolutionofhorror. You can find this podcast in all the usual podcast platforms, and as always, I'd be so grateful if you could drop us a little rating and review on your podcast app of choice, as that always helps us get discovered by new listeners. So, here we go. Let's kick things off. Next week, we are going to be starting with our journey through Frankenstein. We are going to be spending the first few episodes purely on Frankenstein adaptations, and we have to kick things off, of course, with Mary Shelley's original novel. So next week, we're going to be covering a book, not a movie. Next week, I'm going to be joined by a brand new guest, co-host of the From Page to Screen podcast, Chris Newton, and he is going to be joining me to discuss Mary Shelley's 1818 novel in depth. Join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.